Today, there are hundreds and hundreds of books for sale about relationship. It's the #1 issue for so many of us. Finding a soulmate, maintaining an emotional connection with our partner, developing intimacy, that special kind of closeness. It's all here. Chloe, where can I find books on intimacy?
Right this way.
Thanks. Thanks. When social scientists try to explain where our desire for intimacy comes from, they often turn to evolutionary arguments about intimacy improving the chances of survival. But religions, such as Christianity, suggest that intimacy was given to us by God to make human life full and rich. Intimacy is closely connected to love, support and sexuality, and involves a particular kind of sharing. I asked Anne Holland, CEO of Relationships Australia, from her experience as a relationship counsellor, to describe what we mean when we talk about intimacy.
I think intimacy covers both physical and emotional engagement with each other. So it's the sexual relationship is very important to the building of intimacy, but also an emotional intimacy whereby we have a sense that the other person is really there for us, is interested in who we are and what's happening in our emotional world, understands who we are, that they actually get who we are and what's going on for us, and that they're interested to be on a journey with us in developing our emotional maturity, our emotional development, but our whole lives, that they're wanting to be there to share our lives with us. They're not just doing their own thing. So it's that sense of safety you get from being with someone who really does understand you, does care about you, and is interested to continue understanding you, not to assume that they did that last year, so they don't need to do it this year.
I would love for my partner to understand me all the time, but sometimes we don't even understand ourselves. But you have to learn your differences. You may not understand every single solitary thing about the other person. I mean, you can never completely understand that other person, but you can understand where they're coming from.
If you don't feel like your spouse understands you, then that's where you can sort of get on the wrong track on the inside, as far as the perception of what they think is now not the reality of what it is, and so you can end up running off on a tangent in your own mind without that communication there that causes you to have a perspective that's so far incorrect from what your spouse actually thinks.
So many books. I talked to another established authority on marriage and the family, Dr. Richard Schwartz. He's the director at the Center for Self-Leadership in Chicago, USA. And I asked him how he would describe intimacy. Listen to this.
Well, for me, intimacy is the ability to feel safe and known by your partner, and to feel like any part of you that you want to share with that person is going to be accepted, and not only accepted, but even loved. And that can be a very difficult thing to achieve in a relationship, and a kind of rare experience for many couples, because exposing these very vulnerable parts of us to another person has, in many cases, resulted in pain in the past. And so it takes a lot of trust.
It's a good place in our marriage at the moment, because we've worked hard on intimacy for our 27 years of marriage, and now we're at a place of actually finding the benefits of it as other external factors are coming into our marriages. For example, Heather's father recently died, and Heather's mum's just moved into a nursing home, and we've got a lot of things on our plate at the moment, and it's been a real resource, having each other as a sense of comfort and support through that.
Yeah, which has made me realise just, reflecting back on going through different, normal crises, different changes in our relationship, the normal crises that happen to any couple, really, the stages of life, to be able to go through this knowing it is a wonderful safe haven to come home to, which has been a great strength, hasn't it?
I wondered if there was something more to this issue of intimacy. I decided to ask Paul Borges, couples counsellor and educator.
Intimacy comes from the Latin word intimus, which really means innermost. So when I'm being intimate with somebody, I'm opening myself up, I'm making myself vulnerable, I'm sharing parts of myself that I don't share with others, sharing thoughts and feelings that I may not choose to share with other people. Somebody suggested that intimacy becomes part of the sharing and self-disclosure of both pleasurable and painful experiences. We laugh together, we play together, we fight together, we cry together, we talk together.
Many self-help books have been written about the importance of intimacy in our relationships. But how do you achieve it? I think I need a basket.
You know what the number one thing is that people say is missing from their relationships when things are going wrong? Is they're not spending enough time together. Lack of time spent together is the number one factor that affects relationships negatively. So if you're wanting to build intimacy, firstly, you've got to spend time together. You have to show up, you know. You've got to actually be there. You've got to make time to spend with each other to allow the relationship to develop. And sadly, I think often when we kind of get together, we're in that early stage, we're looking out to spend time with each other a lot, aren't we? And, you know, gazing at each other across the dinner table, and we can't wait to get back to spending time with each other. But then we start to let that drop off and we allow other things to get in the way, like work and other commitments. And we assume that what we've got will just sort of stay. But in fact, we need to continue to act as if we're dating, if you like, in that sense of maximising the time that we can have with each other.
Not really.
One really important thing is to remember that they're both on the same team. They're both wanting the same thing, which is to love and be loved, to know and be known. And I think to remember that and come back to that, have it typed up on a sign on the fridge, will bring a couple back to why they're together, and out of that more likely to tap into the other skills and strategies that they can learn.
I think the way that we've retained the spark in our marriage is actually being intentional, actually planning to do things together. So, for example, we have a 3 times a week time where we walk our dog along the beach and back and just catch up with each other and enjoy each other's company.
Other times, just John and Heather nights, whether that means something different than our normal routine of walking along the beach together. So it might just be going out for dinner or going to a different place, like a bushwalk. It's just a J&H, John and Heather time. So it is about being intentional, planful in those events because, as William Doherty says, you know, in his book about being intentional with marriage, it just doesn't happen in the day-to-day running of life where the busyness of schedules and everything else gets in the way. It's, you know, when we were dating, we planned for those dates, and even coming up for 28 years of marriage, we more so need to be planful in our relational time together because we've got 3 children and it's so busy and life can just get in the way if we don't push it out of the way sometimes and put ourselves there so that that's the foundation for our family life and everything else, our actual marriage.
There are some helpful descriptors that we can look at that maybe describe what we actually do when we are in an intimate relationship. What does that actually look like? And perhaps if we list these off. Firstly is that we give emotional support to each other. We talk to each other, we listen, we hold each other, we are being held, and often we will do a combination of those in order for the person to know that I am there for them. I think we're also very keen to promote their welfare. We will defend them, maybe even sometimes when they're wrong, we'll still defend them. We will respect them, we will build them up, we will want what's very best for them, and we'll fight for the very best for the person that we're intimate with. I think we share ourselves and we share our possessions. And the sharing of ourselves is, of course, to share our feelings, our emotions, our thoughts, our ideas, plans, dreams, hopes, as well as the physical possessions that we have. I think we also value our partner's presence. We enjoy being around them. We want them to be around us. And we talk about things that we won't talk to most other people about, or maybe won't talk to anybody about. Will be some of the things that we will talk to the person that we're being intimate with. And of course, that level of talking and that level of sharing is, of course, what builds intimacy and what builds closeness. We want to experience our happiness with them. If something happens that really makes our day, something that really excites us, immediately we want to get on the mobile and we want to ring the person we're in an intimate relationship with. We want to share that. We want to say, wow, you know, you'll never guess what has just happened. And we want to share those kind of moments that happens with our partner, and we want to share those. I think very, very importantly, we know in an intimate relationship that our partner is there for us and that we are there for them in the small stuff, the big stuff, and everything in between.
So, intimacy is built by spending time together, remembering that you're on the same team, emotionally supporting each other and talking and sharing at a deep level. Another key ingredient in creating intimacy is keeping a sense of separateness. In other words, not losing who you are, while you also value and look for connection and closeness with your partner. Sounds a bit confusing, doesn't it? I asked Jenny Brown to explain the delicate balance of separateness and connection in a relationship.
A marriage that has a good balance between these two needs of separateness and connection would be a husband and wife who are just as happy to spend time apart as time together. They're not distressed with one or the other, and they're happy to balance it. It means that their leisure time would have a mixture of an effort to connect and to talk together, sitting together over dinner. Person to person is really important for connection. Not always the group time with friends around. That isn't what fosters the togetherness in a relationship as much as sitting one-on-one. Couples that have the balance are also very happy in their leisure time to go off for a couple of hours and do different things. And to share the load, to give each other the space from the demands of the children and the chores of keeping a household running, and to share that load happily and equally. Not always need to do it together. That would be the ideal kind of balance, very hard to achieve, and it requires two people who are prepared to talk it through, not battle it through, not use manipulation to try and get their needs met in either of those separateness or connection needs, but to be able to say, this is what I would like for our weekend together. This is the time I'd like to myself. This is the time I'd like to spend with you. How does that fit with what your needs are for the weekend? And to listen to each other and talk it through.
I have a lovely little exercise I give couples: what I want for me for the next 12 months, what I want for you for the next 12 months, what I want for us for the next 12 months. And that has a couple of important things in it. It highlights that each of us need our own space and our own activity, that if we spend all our time together, the relationship would go stale, and each of us need our joint activity. And it seems to me that for most couples in this society, they need to be able to sit down and say, you know, Tuesday night's our night, and we're going to do stuff for us that night. And it might be go out and sit at the beach. It might be go out and have tea. It might be go to the movies. It might be go out for 5 minutes and then come home and do their own thing, but almost like teach the children this is our time. The other problem for that for a lot of couples is finding our time. Often when we're married, we want to do a lot of things together at the start. Our interests change. And a lot of couples, particularly in the middle of the way, find it really hard to get their joint activity. I know in my own marriage, it took us about 3 years of struggling after about 20 years to find out, you've got your thing, I've got my thing, but what's our thing? And every few years we have to change that. We find some new our thing. So I think it's not it's not even so much how much time, but it's focused us time. I think going to the movies isn't that good sort of time. It needs to be time where there's something that's us. And it doesn't have to be a lot, but if it's not there, you get to this sort of situation where it was written up in a book once called The Spouse Gap, where after a while people forget each other.
See you. Bye, have fun.
For us, that has meant, like just on purely practical terms, we enjoy having a passion together, but we also enjoy our individual passions and supporting each other in those individual ones and celebrating those. If we only had those, we'd be quite separate from each other, and we've, I guess, our joint passion has been marriage enrichment, hasn't it? Running marriage enrichment retreats, speaking on these sorts of topics, and working together with something that we believe really strongly in. And that has been our joint passion. My individual passion is cycling, long-distance cycling. I really appreciate the fact that John supports me in that, because, you know, and 1,000 husbands wouldn't, because I go on long-distance rides, like from Sydney to Kosciuszko, with a whole bunch of men, and I'm the only female. So it's like, to have a supportive husband who can celebrate in that is a wonderful thing. Yeah.
But it's good for our marriage. If Heather's got time apart, she comes back enlivened and motivated, and maybe being with blokes all week makes you realise I'm not so bad, I suppose, when you see blokey idiosyncrasies in action, I suppose.
That's very true.
Yes,
yeah.
and to some extent that's a shared passion in the fact that Heather's got me a fetching lycra outfit that I now wear, which
the teenagers
which our teenage daughters look at and go... But that's something we share a little bit, but also we've got individual passions that we get recharged externally and bring that charge back into a marriage.
Getting the balance right between separateness and closeness can be tricky, but it's not the only reason that relationships lack intimacy. What other things can get in the way of our desire for connection and closeness?
Intimacy is easily blocked, unfortunately. We can inadvertently do lots of things to stop this intimacy growing in the way that it ought to. And it usually comes from either a lack of understanding of what partnership is and our need to behave in ways that strengthen the relationship and contribute positively to the growth of intimacy. In other words, it doesn't happen by chance. It does require an active and conscious effort. Secondly, we can do it in a kind of an unconscious way or a not deliberate way, and that is that we do it from because we're fearful, because we've grown up or had previous relationship experiences that have led us to doubt that it's possible to even create that kind of emotional intimacy. Much as we might want it, we behave in ways that actually stop it happening, and that is by not sharing our feelings or our experience of the relationship and of life generally, that we remain emotionally distant, or that as we start to get closer to the other person, we actually put up barriers, such as we might trigger a fight. We might trigger a disagreement, perhaps not knowingly, but we do it because we're not feeling safe with the degree of closeness that we've reached. So we create a fight, which means you move apart a little bit. And then, okay, you know, we're more distant, but we feel more comfortable because that's what we're used to based on our previous life experiences. So we can be doing this without even knowing it. Okay, we can allow things like the mess around the house or some disagreement over something quite trivial. We can allow that to be the trigger to create more distance because actually we feel more comfortable with a greater degree of distance. So unless we can get some help to allow us to understand ourselves better and how we're participating in ways that are actually not constructive to the growth of intimacy, then we can inadvertently be sabotaging that intimacy over time, or indeed even sabotage the relationship itself.
If or when this happens, can intimacy be revived? When love dies, can we recapture this sense of closeness with our partner? Can we reconnect?
I think any couples counsellor who's worked in this field for any length of time have seen couples who really wondered about the future of their relationship, or even believed that basically their love had died, have seen that couple being able to revive that relationship. I mean, it certainly happens, and it happens quite regularly. I think there are a number of things that people need to do if they want that to happen. And firstly, I think a conscious decision needs to be made to put the relationship first. I think that's very intentional. It's about doing the kinds of behaviours that are likely to bring closeness and connectedness and intimacy. And that's not dependent primarily on feeling. Generally, what happens is behaviours come first and then feelings will follow. And that may take some time. It may take some months before some of those feelings that the couple really miss in the relationship actually start to come back. Part of that is being available, not only time-wise. Time-wise is obviously very, very important, but also energy, giving energy. If we're with our partner when we're totally exhausted and we've got nothing much to give, then obviously that's not going to be the most helpful thing to do to revive intimacy. I think if we always want to stay emotionally safe, in other words, not take risks, then intimacy is not going to come back. It's not going to be revived. To only do that, which is emotionally safe, is to remain stuck. So we need to be able to take down some of the walls that we built up when we got hurt as the relationship was deteriorating. As intimacy is lost and people start to get hurt, they put up walls, they put up barriers to protect themselves. The taking down of those barriers, the taking down of those walls is certainly not an easy process or an instantaneous process, but it's one that people need to work on intentionally if intimacy is going to come back in the relationship. There's also been a lot of research by social researchers in the last 5 or 10 years about the issue of forgiveness. It's interesting that research has actually pointed out that relationships and people in relationships report higher levels of marital satisfaction and satisfaction in their couple relationship if they can give forgiveness and receive forgiveness. If that process gets stuck, and it often does in relationships where there isn't a lot of goodwill left anymore, then maybe a couples counsellor may be the best place for some of that processing to happen, the office of a couples counsellor.
I've been a counsellor for 25 years, and the reason I stay is because I do see couples making significant change. Whether it's a couple who've been married for 32 years, house on the market separating, who come in and learn some skills and actually talk about the stuff that's really going on with the feelings under the feelings, and to get photos later of their trips and their grandchildren is just really exciting. So I've seen many couples who think there's no hope for us, discover that love can be grown again, respect and even trust can be rebuilt if they have a companion with that and they're willing to have a go.
I've got a list that I sometimes look at that looks at what happens for long-term couples, and that list came out of an interview of people who'd been married over 30 years. I probably need to hold it in my hand to comment on some of the things in it. But one of the first things is just being realistic. That having a realistic understanding of who you are and who I am and our reason for being together. So if there's not realism, people are constantly trying to force the other to join their fantasy, and it goes nowhere. The other thing is a really strong commitment to this marriage. It's like, we're here to struggle through this. I've had a lot of couples tell me, you know, it was really hard, but we stayed with it and we got through to this new level of being with each other. I've had a lot of singles tell me, I'm really sorry I didn't struggle.
Look, to have a really good relationship takes time and energy. It's about feeling loved, understood, and emotionally connected. Intimacy is something you have to work at. Even if you feel you've lost it, you may well be able to get it back, but it takes intention and investment. It just might be the best investment you'll ever make.